Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a really fascinating theological framework all about wealth creation. Specifically, we're unpacking some massive concepts from Master Sense by Faraday's recent sermon, Power to Make Wealth. This isn't just about getting rich, right? It's a deeply structured look at activating, protecting, and aligning your resources with a much higher purpose. So let's just get right into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the wealth engine metaphor, then look at activating the power. After that, we'll cover the dangers that kill wealth, define kingdom prosperity, and wrap it all up with the final charge.
Okay, part one, the wealth engine metaphor. We are reframing how we actually look at money. Think about this for a second. What if you were chasing the exhaust instead of fixing the engine? It's a pretty provocative question, isn't it? But it perfectly sets the stage for the entire text. It challenges us to take a hard look at where we're putting our energy on a daily basis. Whether you're building a career or running a business, are you literally looking at the wrong end of the vehicle?
The sermon uses this incredible, striking metaphor. Faraday says, money is like the exhaust of a car, but power is the engine. You do not chase exhaust, you fix the engine. The whole argument here is that money itself is just a byproduct. The real engine? That's your underlying power, which the text defines as a mix of wisdom, skill, discipline, integrity, and divine favor. The big takeaway is that if you actually focus on building that engine, the money, the exhaust, will just naturally follow.
The source brings this to life with the imagery of fishermen. It really hits home the idea that an engine absolutely needs fuel and action to run. In this specific framework, you can't just wait around. Labor, faith, and obedience have to come before you ever see any kind of financial overflow or what the text calls a net-breaking miracle. Basically, there's always a divine instruction first, and you have to take real action before that net starts to break.
Moving right along to Section 2, Activating the Power. Let's look at the 5 necessary steps.
So how do we actually build this engine? The text lays out a highly practical step-by-step methodology. Step 1, remember God as the source. Step 2, consult and obey. Step 3, honor with your resources. Step 4, acquire skill and diligence. And Step 5, establish the covenant. Notice how this is a really interesting blend of spiritual devotion and just roll-up-your-sleeves practical effort.
That very first step is grounded in Deuteronomy 8:18. The sermon makes this vital point that memory isn't just recalling a random fact, it's an active spiritual discipline. Remembering that a higher power is the source of your intelligence, your opportunities, literally the breath in your lungs, the text argues that's exactly what protects the human heart from arrogance and pride. For Step 2, consulting and obeying, the text points us straight to the story of Peter in Luke chapter 5. Remember, Peter worked all night, caught absolutely nothing, but then he acted on divine instruction to drop his net one more time. The source pairs this with the story of the widow's oil to highlight a huge mechanic in this framework. Divine instruction literally has to be met with human action before any results actually manifest in reality.
And this point really hits hard in Step 4, which is all about skill and diligence. The sermon compares 2 different graduates. One is just waiting endlessly, complaining, blaming the economy because they didn't land a CEO role on day 1. But the other graduate? They take an entry-level job, fire up YouTube on their phone to learn digital skills, and end up starting an entire company. The source argues fiercely that having faith without continually upskilling yourself just leads to total stagnation. Your phone is a tool to build capacity, folks, not just something to doom scroll on.
Which brings us to Section 3, Dangers that Kill Wealth. I like to call these the 3 engine killers.
After telling you how to build the engine, the source pivots to what will absolutely destroy it. There are 3 main pitfalls here: forgetting God and becoming proud, praying without working, and dishonesty. The text warns that pride tricks you into thinking you did it all yourself. Laziness, disguised as piety, is just useless. You can't pray for a massive harvest if you never bothered to plant any seeds. And fraud? Well, taking shortcuts might look like a quick win, but the text insists it will ultimately bring sorrow and destroy any long-term stability you've built.
It really is a literal crossroads. Down one path, you've got family, faith, and peace. Down the other, it's this dark, isolated pursuit of money at all costs. The sermon is super clear here. If chasing money pulls you away from your foundation or wrecks your family life, your priorities are totally corrupt. Pursuing wealth without integrity is presented as a massive spiritual danger.
Faraday really doubles down on the dangers of laziness by quoting James 2:17, "Faith without works is dead." The bold assertion here is that prayer can never be an excuse to just do nothing. According to the text, prayer prepares the spiritual atmosphere, sure, but your diligence is what actually goes into the field to harvest. God provides the seed, but you've got to be the one to go out and plant it.
All right, Section 4, Defining Kingdom Prosperity. Let's look way beyond the bank account.
We really need to clarify what the source means by prosperity because it completely rejects the modern idea that it's all about having cash. Kingdom prosperity is defined holistically. It's wealth surrendered to a higher purpose, sure, but it also encompasses your spiritual health, your mental soundness, and relational peace. The sermon argues passionately that if money destroys your marriage or ruins your peace of mind, then by definition, you are not truly prosperous.
And honestly, that leads to what I think is an absolute mic drop quote from the text. Money without peace is poverty. Wow. What a stark reframing of wealth, right? It really reinforces the idea that having inner peace and holding onto your integrity are just infinitely more valuable than compromised riches that bring misery into your home.
Finally, we are at Section 5, the final charge. It is time to shift your focus.
The sermon wraps up with a huge challenge. Stop the passive, send me cash mentality. Instead, we're instructed to actively pray for power. And remember how power is defined here? It's asking for skill, ideas, courage, and discipline. It's exactly like the story of Solomon. When he was asked what he wanted, he didn't ask for a pile of gold, he asked for the wisdom to lead. Because he asked for the engine, the exhaust naturally followed.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question derived directly from the sermon's altar call. Are you going to keep chasing the exhaust, or are you finally ready to build your engine? Take a moment and really think about how you approach your resources, your skills, and your integrity. Focus on building that engine and let the rest follow. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.
If this message opened your mind, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to Master Sense by Faraday, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who needs wisdom, clarity, and inspiration today. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next powerful lesson. Remember, knowledge becomes power only when you act on it. See you in the next video.
Let's jump right into this explainer and unpack a truly fascinating theological framework that completely redefines true prosperity. You know, often when we think of wealth, we instantly picture a magical drop of cash just falling out of the sky. But the source material we're looking at today, which comes from a sermon titled The Power to Make Wealth, flips that perspective on its head. It actually presents wealth as a God-given power, like a dynamic living ability, rather than just static money sitting in a bank account. We are going to explore exactly how this framework challenges conventional thinking and outlines a very specific architecture for producing and sustaining real prosperity. Here's our exact roadmap for today. We're hitting 5 distinct pillars. First, the source of wealth. 2, engine over exhaust. 3, wisdom and capacity. 4, skills and diligence. And finally, 5, integrity and character. All right, let's start with part 1, the source of wealth. Establishing ownership. Before we even talk about generating wealth, we absolutely have to establish where it comes from and who actually owns it. It's a pretty provocative question, isn't it? Who owns everything? To understand wealth through the lens of this text, we literally have to rewire our assumptions about the resources we chase every single day. Human nature screams at us to claim absolute ownership over our houses, our paychecks, our businesses. But this framework insists, right out of the gate, that we aren't the ultimate owners. We're simply stewards, managing resources that belong to a higher authority. The core argument here is that God is not broke. He is never in short supply. Quoting Haggai 2:8, the author emphasizes that he owns the earth, the businesses, the professions, honestly, even the intelligence and the very breath in our nostrils. The text wants to firmly establish that the ultimate source of wealth is infinite. But the really crucial takeaway is this. Because he is the owner, true prosperity requires us to maintain a constant connection with that source. If you miss the source, the text warns, you might accumulate resources, but you'll entirely lack peace. Moving on to part 2, engine over exhaust, the paradigm shift. Okay, this is where the text introduces a massive, undeniable contrast. On one side, we have the world standard method, which is essentially chasing the exhaust. The author argues that God doesn't just drop bags of money from heaven, because money itself is just the exhaust. It's simply the byproduct. On the other side, we see the true gift, which is the engine. God gives the power to make wealth. Think about a car for a second. You wouldn't run down the street chasing the smoke coming out of a tailpipe, right? You'd want the engine that's actually generating the forward momentum. So the profound shift here is praying not just for the byproduct, but for the capacity, the engine, to produce it. Your prayer goes from "Lord, bless me" to "Lord, make me blessable and productive."
But hey, there is a major warning label attached here. When we actually experience success, when that salary bumps up or the business expands, we can develop a serious memory problem. We might falsely claim, hey, my power and the might of my own hand got me this wealth. And that is exactly why true prosperity requires constantly remembering the source. If you forget the giver, the author warns, the gift itself can easily become this massive trap of arrogance and ultimately emptiness.
Let's dive into part 3, wisdom and capacity, deconstructing the engine.
So what exactly is this engine made of? Well, the text argues that this power isn't some mystical, floating aura. It is highly practical. It starts with divine wisdom and insight. We're talking about getting an idea, a strategy, or a very specific solution to a real problem. It's the whole concept of God giving you the wisdom to fish, rather than just handing you a fish. But here's the catch. Wisdom alone isn't going to cut it. It has to be combined with physical capacity, strength, and good health. You actually need the physical energy to work, the discipline to drag yourself out of bed early, and the health to show up every single day to execute that wisdom.
To see this divine wisdom in action, the text provides a brilliant real-world example of a brother in a church who noticed a logistical nightmare. They were completely struggling to accurately count the people attending. God gave this man the insight and the wisdom to solve it, and he actually built a software app that the church now uses. That, according to the text, is a direct deposit of the power to make wealth. It's practical, everyday problem-solving born straight from insight.
Which brings us to a phrase that perfectly captures this whole dynamic. Anointing without capacity leads to frustration. Think about that. You can have all the spiritual grace or brilliant world-changing ideas in your head, but having dreams or prophecy is completely useless without the grit and discipline to actually execute them. The text calls out people who have these grand, sweeping visions but absolutely zero structure. The ultimate goal is for grace to meet capacity. You have to build the physical and mental infrastructure to actually hold the blessing you're asking for.
Which naturally leads us to part 4, skills and diligence, the practical application.
Now, this part really forces us to look in the mirror when it comes to our daily habits, especially with our technology. The author points out that our phones, our laptops, they're incredible gifts, but they are totally neutral tools. The difference between using a smartphone to build wealth by learning, creating, and marketing versus wasting hours browsing unprofitable things comes down entirely to stewardship. We all have access to these tools, but the real power to make wealth involves having the discipline to use them as instruments of creation, rather than just tools for endless, mindless consumption.
Plus, we have to remember that wealth is not sustained by initial excitement. It's so easy to get fired up about a new idea for a week or two. But the text relies on Proverbs 22:29 to remind us that success is sustained by pure diligence. It requires the courage to launch out, like Peter letting down his nets in the biblical narrative, and the sheer grit to just keep going. You can pray for opportunities all day long, but when one finally knocks, you absolutely must have the preparation to recognize it and the bold diligence to act on it immediately.
And finally, part 5, integrity and character, the ultimate safeguard.
Here we reach the ethical anchor for everything we've talked about today. Honestly, without this final piece, the entire engine just falls apart. Look, you can certainly acquire money through fraud, by cutting corners, or by stepping on people, but the source text explicitly states that God's kind of wealth requires truth, trust, and character. Quoting Proverbs 10:22, the author notes that dishonest money comes bundled with sorrow and anxiety. True power to make wealth inherently includes the integrity to manage it ethically. If you lack character, the wealth you build will eventually just crush you under the weight of your own compromises.
So what is the point of all this? Ultimately, this entire engine of wisdom, capacity, diligence, and integrity isn't given to us just so we can live in luxury and hoard resources. According to Deuteronomy 8:18, which is really the anchor text of this whole framework, this power is given to establish a deeper covenant. Wealth becomes worship, success becomes service. The prosperity generated by this engine is meant to be channeled into a much greater purpose that extends far, far beyond just the individual. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought drawn directly from the heart of the text. As you build up your own capacity, as you put these tools into practice and inevitably start seeing success, how will you ensure your prosperity remains a purpose rather than a trap?
Will you remember the source that gave you the engine, or will you get distracted by the exhaust? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this framework helps you rethink how you build and sustain true wealth.
If this message opened your mind, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to Master Sense by Faraday, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who needs wisdom, clarity, and inspiration today. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next powerful lesson. Remember, knowledge becomes power only when you act on it. See you in the next video.